Have you ever felt trapped in a life planned out for you, where every step is mapped by someone else's expectations? Imagine having all the luxury, the comfort, yet feeling like a stranger in your own story. That was Isabella's life, a wealthy heiress with everything on the surface but a heart yearning for true connection, something real beyond the mask of wealth. When she met Kyle, a simple waiter, their connection wasn't just about love, it was a rebellion against a life of control and hidden sacrifices. Her father, a powerful man with his own secrets, was determined to keep her in his world. But Isabella wanted more, a chance to break free to find her own truth. Isabella, the daughter of a powerful family, found herself trapped in a life of luxury, yet far from any real emotional truth. Every forced smile at events felt like a reminder of what was missing, a mystery that only grew with each encounter. When she met Kyle, a waiter, something sparked, an unspoken connection. Maybe it was the way he didn't care about titles or inheritance. In his simplicity, she discovered a part of herself she hadn't even known was there, a truth no one had ever shown her. With Kyle, Isabella felt something rare, the freedom to be truly herself. She could laugh without worrying about judgment, share stories without filters, and for a brief moment, experience a truth that seemed long sacrificed. His presence was like a mirror showing her what she really wanted in life. It was as if he was silently teaching her to value the little things, something she'd never considered meaningful. This connection felt intense, almost like reuniting with a long-lost family member. But loving Kyle meant challenging the logic of her upbringing and every plan her father, Anthony, had set in stone. Isabella knew that following her heart might mean losing everything she'd ever known. Still, this was the one truth that brought her peace, a necessary sacrifice to live fully. Sometimes, in the quest for what truly matters, we have to let go of what was planned for us. Like a riddle, this choice pulled her in deeper, making her question if keeping up appearances was really worth it. The mystery Kyle carried with him was an invitation for Isabella to explore new horizons. His direct gaze, free from hidden motives, felt like discovering a lost relative among strangers. And so, she began to understand the weight of finding something, or someone, that, despite being outside her world, felt more real than anything around her. Loving Kyle was a chance to experience something that transcended expectations, an adventure filled with truth, challenging the values she'd been raised on. Even so, the fear of losing it all lingered in Isabella's mind. But like any meaningful discovery, love demands courage. Every time she saw Kyle, there was a genuine sense of letting go, as if bit by bit, she sacrificed her fear of losing security to find purpose. It was a journey where she rediscovered her own essence, shedding the persona her family expected her to be. Without knowing, Kyle was guiding her toward a new understanding of life. With a heart torn between family ties and the desire to follow her own path, Isabella realized that loving Kyle was more than just a romantic choice. It was a decision that revealed a deep truth about herself. And as the story unfolded, she found herself more entangled in the search for the truth that had been missing from her life, ignoring the signs of what it might mean for her future. Isabella's father, Anthony, was a man who lived by rules and plans, as if life itself could be mapped out without a single step out of place. He'd carved out her future in meticulous detail, leaving little room for any mystery or personal truth. From the schools she attended to the people she was allowed to befriend, everything about Isabella's life was designed to fit a certain mold. But she was growing tired of living in a carefully crafted story, longing for something real, something that felt like her own. Anthony's intentions weren't malicious. He truly believed he was giving his daughter a secure, prosperous life. Yet, his vision of security came with sacrifices Isabella hadn't agreed to make. Underneath his strict authority was a deep-seated fear of losing control, a fear he never shared. But Isabella could see it in the way he'd grip his drink tighter when she brought up her own ideas, a reminder of how a lost family member's choices had affected him deeply. His drive to keep her safe became, to her, a cage. Despite her love for her father, Isabella began to realize she couldn't be the person he wanted without sacrificing herself in the process. There was no room for her own dreams, no space for that sense of family mystery she was so drawn to. It was as if Anthony was blocking every door to independence, leaving her trapped in the shadows of expectations. Breaking free wasn't just an act of rebellion, it was a declaration of self-worth, an acknowledgement that she was more than her father's plans. And yet, standing up to Anthony was no small feat. Every word of resistance, every act of defiance, was met with disbelief, even a little heartbreak. For someone who had never questioned his authority, Isabella's newfound desire for freedom struck a nerve. It reminded him of the truths he'd spent years hiding, truths about family sacrifices and the painful consequences of unrestrained independence. Isabella's challenge forced Anthony to confront that inner fear he'd buried deep. Still, Isabella wasn't deterred. She knew that love shouldn't require the loss of oneself, and she wasn't about to sacrifice her truth for anyone, even her father. She wanted to live without those invisible chains, to make choices that reflected her own heart. In the quiet moments after their arguments, she'd feel a rush of both guilt and pride, wondering if she was, perhaps, unveiling the family mystery her father feared. But this inner conflict fueled her determination even more. As Isabella pushed against her father's plans, she sensed that something profound lay beneath his resistance. A secret tethered to their family's history, to a loss he couldn't quite let go. And while this was just the beginning of her journey toward self-ownership, she felt the pull of that hidden truth stronger than ever, knowing it would change her life in ways even she couldn't predict. As Isabella's relationship with Kyle deepened, so did the weight of what she stood to lose. In moments of quiet honesty, she'd picture her life if her father discovered their love. His anger, the shame, maybe even a permanent rift. The idea of losing her family's approval, the only life she'd ever known, filled her with a mixture of dread and resolve. It was as if love itself had become a risk, a daring leap into unknown territory where she'd have to navigate without her father's guiding hand. Despite this fear, every moment with Kyle felt like a balm, a reminder of the truth she'd found within herself. The simplicity of their connection stood in stark contrast to the sacrifices her father demanded. They'd meet in hidden corners, where she could laugh without restraint, share her deepest thoughts without fear of judgment, and for a few precious hours, exist as the person she truly was. Yet, the risk loomed constantly over them, a silent reminder of the mystery that bound her family's legacy. Kyle, too, understood the cost of their love. Although he had no desire to tear her away from her family, he couldn't ignore the reality of their situation. Their time together was marked by unspoken words, each meeting a gamble, each goodbye weighted with the possibility it could be their last. But he saw in Isabella a light he'd never seen before, a spark that spoke of truth and sacrifice, a willingness to challenge the life she'd been handed in search of something real. With each encounter, Isabella felt herself drifting further from the path her father had paved. It was a terrifying freedom, like stepping into a story she didn't fully understand, one filled with mystery and the quiet fear of what she might lose. She knew that if her father found out, he'd see it as a betrayal, a reckless dismissal of the sacrifices he'd made to keep their family's reputation untarnished. But was that reputation worth sacrificing herself for? As her heart pulled her closer to Kyle, Isabella began to wonder if true love required this kind of sacrifice. Was she destined to keep one foot in each world, half loyal daughter, half free spirit? And if she had to choose, could she really give up everything she'd known? These questions haunted her, filling every quiet moment, every glance Kyle cast her way. She felt like a stranger in her own life, balancing on the edge of a truth her father would never understand. In her heart, Isabella sensed that whatever decision she made would carry consequences far beyond her own life. It was no longer just about her happiness but a mystery deeply rooted in her family's history, a legacy of lost connections and sacrifices untold. And as she gazed into Kyle's eyes, she knew that this was only the beginning of the choices she'd have to make, each one leading her further into the unknown. When Isabella finally decided to commit her life to Kyle, it was as if a weight had lifted. She had chosen love over the chains of wealth and expectations. Standing at the crossroads, she felt a rare clarity, a sense of truth that had eluded her for so long. This wasn't just about defying her father or society, it was about honoring her own heart. In that moment, Isabella embraced the idea that some sacrifices are worth the risk, and some truths are worth fighting for, even if they defy the very fabric of a family legacy. For the first time, Isabella truly felt free. With Kyle by her side, she envisioned a life built not on duty or obligation but on a foundation of shared values and real connection. Gone were the stifling expectations and rules her father had drilled into her. She was ready to let go of the familiar and walk into a life where she could choose her own path, one free from the mystery and sacrifice that had always surrounded her. It felt liberating, almost like a rebirth, as if she'd finally stepped into her own story. But Isabella knew the gravity of her choice. She was prepared to leave behind a world of privilege, yet it wasn't as simple as turning away from material wealth. Choosing Kyle meant stepping into a realm of the unknown, a world where she'd have to sacrifice not only the comforts she'd grown up with but the very family ties that defined her. The family mystery and hidden truths she'd grown up with felt like ghostly presences, whispering of the price she'd pay for choosing her own happiness. Kyle understood the depth of Isabella's choice. He knew this wasn't just a matter of two people in love but a significant turning point in her life. He admired her courage, and though he felt the weight of her decision, he also knew he couldn't ask her to change. This decision had to be hers alone, a choice rooted in the truth she'd found within herself. And in that, he saw the sacrifice she was willing to make, not just for him but for her own sense of freedom. As their wedding day approached, Isabella's heart was filled with both excitement and trepidation. She knew that there was no going back, that by marrying Kyle she would be closing one chapter and stepping into another that carried its own set of mysteries and sacrifices. But she felt an inner peace, a confidence that she was at last choosing a life based on her own values. For Isabella, this was the ultimate act of self-discovery, a journey that could only be understood by taking that leap. In the days leading up to the wedding, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger story. She'd stepped into a new realm of her family's legacy, one where the past was beginning to unravel, and secrets long buried were on the verge of being uncovered. And as she prepared for this next chapter, she felt an odd anticipation, as if life itself was leading her toward truths she hadn't yet begun to imagine. As Isabella and Kyle exchanged vows, a new chapter seemed to open, one built on love and truth. But as the ceremony continued, a murmur rippled through the crowd. An unexpected revelation was about to emerge. Isabella was stunned to discover that Kyle, the humble waiter she'd risked everything for, was in fact a wealthy heir himself. The man she thought had brought simplicity and freedom into her life now carried his own complex past, one marked by family secrets and sacrifices she hadn't anticipated. It felt like life was playing a strange twist of fate on them both. The news hit her like a wave, stirring emotions she didn't know how to process. Was this the same Kyle she thought she knew, or had he hidden his true self? Their love, once pure and simple, now had layers of mystery she hadn't bargained for. It was as if the familiar stranger standing beside her had suddenly revealed a hidden identity, one that brought with it an entirely new set of expectations and pressures. In that moment, Isabella's idea of truth felt shaken, her heart caught in a whirlwind of questions. Kyle, too, hadn't intended for this revelation to come out the way it did. He had cherished their connection precisely because it wasn't tied to wealth or social status. But the truth, unavoidable as it was, had emerged at the worst possible time. In his eyes, Isabella saw both regret and a plea for understanding. He wanted her to know that his love for her was genuine, beyond any family mystery or inherited fortune. Yet he feared that his hidden identity would break the trust they'd so carefully built. The impact on their relationship was immediate and profound. Isabella now faced the challenge of reconciling the Kyle she fell in love with and this new version of him, a man with a legacy as complex as her own. Trust, something she had worked so hard to build, suddenly felt fragile, as if a single misstep could unravel everything. Her commitment to him had been based on shared simplicity, a break from the wealth and control that defined her past. And now, the truth forced her to question whether love could withstand such revelations. Yet, as the days passed, Isabella found herself drawn to Kyle's story, curious about the hidden layers that made him who he was. In his family's sacrifices and secrets, she recognized pieces of her own journey. His life, marked by the same struggles for identity and freedom, felt strangely familiar, almost like the lost family connection she had been yearning to uncover. It became clear that perhaps their union was more than a coincidence. It was a shared quest for truth, a bridge between two worlds shaped by similar legacies. This unexpected twist opened doors they hadn't known existed, leading them to face questions of trust, loyalty, and the sacrifices they were each willing to make. Their journey together was no longer just about love. It was now woven with mystery and revelation, forcing them to redefine their relationship on new terms. And as Isabella looked at Kyle, she sensed that the path ahead would demand even greater courage, a willingness to explore truths that neither of them could yet fully grasp. After the shocking revelations, Isabella knew the journey ahead wasn't just about her and Kyle but about healing the fractures within her family. Her father, Anthony, had always believed he knew what was best, but now he stood face to face with the consequences of his control. Slowly, the realization settled in. His sacrifices, his relentless planning, had created a wall between him and his daughter. Isabella saw it too, and though the pain was real, she felt an urge to bridge the gap, to find a way back to each other without compromising her truth. Anthony's pride, however, was a mountain to climb. Years of strict authority had hardened him, leaving little room for vulnerability or admitting his mistakes. But as he watched Isabella and Kyle together, a flicker of understanding crossed his mind. The mystery surrounding his own past and the unspoken sacrifices he'd made began to weigh heavily. Perhaps he thought the path to reconciliation lay in uncovering these truths, in sharing the burdens he'd kept hidden for so long. It was as if life was offering him one final chance to set things right. Isabella sensed this shift in her father, and while it wasn't easy, she extended her hand, offering him a way forward. She knew that healing wouldn't come overnight. It would require patience, empathy, and a willingness to see beyond years of control. In quiet conversations, they started to unpack the family mysteries, the choices that had once driven them apart. For the first time, Anthony began to speak not as a father enforcing rules but as a man who, too, had felt the weight of his own choices. It was a delicate process, each word a step toward trust. Kyle stood by Isabella through this journey, his presence a steady reminder of the love that had brought them to this point. He encouraged her, reminding her that reconciliation was not about erasing the past but about building something new from it. His own life, shaped by similar struggles, gave him a deep understanding of the complexities Isabella faced. Together they learned that family ties, even when strained, could be reimagined, not broken but reshaped with compassion and honesty. As Anthony began to let down his guard, he came to see his daughter in a new light, not as a rebellious child but as a strong, independent woman willing to make her own sacrifices for love. This realization sparked a profound shift in him. The values he'd clung to, the control he'd insisted on, began to feel less important in the face of his daughter's happiness. In seeing her strength, he found his own path to vulnerability, a side of himself he'd almost forgotten. And in that vulnerability, he discovered a truth that bound them closer than any plan he could create. Reconciliation, they realized, wasn't about reclaiming the past but about embracing a future built on understanding and mutual respect. The process wasn't without its challenges, yet with each step, the distance between them lessened. Anthony's acceptance of Kyle, his respect for Isabella's choices, and his willingness to share the hidden truths of their family became the foundation of a new relationship. And as Isabella looked into her father's eyes, she sensed a peace she hadn't felt before, a peace that marked the beginning of a new family legacy, one rooted in love and acceptance. What would you do if you knew that discovering your truth could change everything? Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. What parts of Isabella's story hit home for you? And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Let's keep exploring these powerful stories together, one truth at a time.